PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are actually going to be taking a look at college hockey, as we're actually going to be breaking down the UNLV Skating Rebels. After a great season by UNLV, on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be doing a review and kind of looking at what they have done in the 2023-2024 season for UNLV. So this is going to be a fun episode, kind of a different episode than what we have done in the past, as we are going to be talking a little college hockey. And I just want to say, before we get into the breakdown, congratulations to UNLV for making it to the national championship game. Now, unfortunately, it did not end the way that everyone hoped that it would, but the fact that they made it to the national championship game, Division I ACHA, is an accomplishment in itself. So before we get into the breakdown, I just want to say, on behalf of Vegas Hockey Hub and PR Connections Radio, congratulations and a great season by UNLV Rebels hockey. I want to say props to the coaching staff, to the players, to all the people involved with UNLV, because this hockey team was fun to watch. I went to a good amount of games this year, recorded video, I took footage. You see on all our social medias, I've had UNLV stuff on there throughout the season. So I just wanted to say very quickly, before we get into the review, congratulations, and I want to say very good season by UNLV. So discussing the UNLV Rebels hockey team here on Vegas Hockey Hub, and we're going to start with the very beginning. We're going to kind of take a look back and then kind of move forward here. So when you started out the season, going all the way back to late September, they took on Grand Canyon University, and they would win their first two games. The first one, they would win 5-4, and then they would win in a shutout 11-0 over Grand Canyon University, win the first two games of the season. This is a UNLV hockey team that began the year for ACHA Division I. They would be ranked inside the top 5. So when it came to UNLV, they're riding momentum from what they did last year. They were one of the higher ranked teams in the ACHA from the past season, trying to build momentum off of that. And they did that by winning the first two games of the season. And then, after being on the road for those first two games, they go to Arizona State, and unfortunately, they lose their first game of the season, 5-3 on October 5th, before winning in a 3-2, very good back-and-forth battle on October 6th. However, their first game of the season, their first home opener on October 13th, Grand Canyon University comes down to City National Arena for the UNLV Skating Rebels. And UNLV, they actually would win this matchup, as they would win 9-4, and then they would win 3-1. So on the back-to-back days, Grand Canyon University, they would be 4-0 against them to start out the year. They would be 5-1 in the first 6 games of the season. The next matchup would be against the Utah Utes, as it would be at City National Arena. It'd be a back-to-back series there, and UNLV would sweep this, as they would win 6-2 on October 20th, and then would have a good back-and-forth battle on October 21st, as they would win 3-2. So UNLV being 7-1 to begin the season, they would actually go up against University of Arizona to end the October calendar. And when it came to October, they would actually improve and actually would get back-to-back wins against Arizona at City National Arena, as they would win 3-2 on October 26th. Then next night would win 3-1 on October 27th. So far for UNLV, 10 games into the year, and they would have a really good record of 9-1 coming off of October. So UNLV, which would be around 4th in the rankings for the UNLV Skating Rebels, heading into November, they would actually continue their homestand as they would take on the San Diego State Aztecs to begin November. And in their back-to-back games, they would beat San Diego State 6-1 on November 2nd before winning 8-1 on November 3rd. This was infamously the midnight game on November 3rd. I remember going to that. That was a lot of fun going to a midnight game. Kind of takes me back to the midnight games the Las Vegas Wranglers had at the Orleans Arena back in the day. But UNLV won 8-1 on that midnight game. So UNLV goes to 11-1 at this point in the season. And then they actually would have to go to Illinois, as they would have a 3-game stand towards the end of November. They would lose to Illinois State University 4-3, and then they would lose 3-2 against Ohio University. So unfortunately, this would be their first back-to-back loss on the season for UNLV. But the good news is about this series, about their 3 games, they would actually end it on a high note, as they would actually win 3-0 over Menoit State. So for UNLV, as they get towards the end of November, this was a good situation for them, as towards the end of November, they would have a good record of 12-3 on the season. 15 games in, 12-3 for your UNLV Skating Rebels. Now, getting into December, they would actually start out by going to Arizona to face the Arizona Wildcats, and they would win both matchups here, as they would actually win 6-1 on December 1st, and then the next day, December 2nd, would win 4-2 against Arizona. So they would actually advance to 14-3 on the season before they head home to take on Jamestown. And I was actually here for both games for Jamestown, and they did win the first matchup 4-3, but unfortunately would lose the December 9th matchup 2-1. And I will say, when it comes to UNLV hockey, at this point in time, 19 games in, towards the end of the 2023 calendar, the fact that they were 15-4 throughout the first 19 games of the season, they're still ranked in the top 5, and they would have actually one of their most important matchups heading into the beginning of the new year. As on January 5th, January 6th, the number 1 team in the ACHA would come to City National Arena. This was sold out. They were packed, City National Arena. There were so many people who came from Menoit State to cheer on the Beavers, to take on the Rebels, and they would have back-to-back games. Now, the first game was a 5-4 loss for UNLV. I was there. I was taking footage. If you want to go to Vegas Hockey Hub on Instagram, TikTok, we were on all of our social medias recording that footage. UNLV had a good back-and-forth matchup. It was a good battle between the Beavers and the Rebels, but the Rebels would lose 5-4. And then the next game was just, unfortunately, one of their worst losses of the year, as they would be shut out 5-0 at City National Arena at home. So really sitting back and analyzing the UNLV Rebels schedule, they would be 15-6 at this point in time, but they would turn it around for the rest of January, as they would have a back-to-back series against Central Oklahoma and Arizona State. They would win both games against Arizona State, a 10-2 matchup on January 19th, and an 8-5 final on January 20th. And then against Central Oklahoma, they would split the series there, as they won 3-2, but they would lose, it actually would be shut out 2-0 against Central Oklahoma. So they split that series there. So when you really stop and analyze what UNLV was doing at that point, they are 17-7 towards the end of January. You still have a month and a half left for UNLV, and they would be 17-7. So going into February, this is where they had actually a good amount of road games. Actually, 4 of their 6 games in February would be on the road. They would go to University of Utah to take on the Utes, and they would split this series. So they would lose 4-3 against Utah, and then would win 5-4. So they would be 18-8. And then against Colorado State, going to Colorado, they would actually sweep this series and win. So they would go to 20-8, as it would be 5-2, and then 6-1. So UNLV, so far at this point, heads back home to City National Arena. And I was here for both of these games, and I can tell you that it was just pure domination by your UNLV Skating Rebels, as UNLV would take on the Oregon Ducks on February 16th and February 17th, and they would win the first matchup 12-0. I will repeat that for all the people in the back. UNLV beat Oregon. They shut them out 12-0. And then the next night, they would do it again. As UNLV would beat Oregon 6-0. So, in a 2-game span, your UNLV Skating Rebels would shut out Oregon Ducks 18-0. So, pure domination. That was just one of the best games that we have seen, one of the best series that we saw from UNLV when it came to the UNLV Rebels hockey team. And at this point in time, they would be 22-8 as they would head into their last 2 games of the season. So UNLV, they would take on the Colorado Buffaloes, and it would be a back-to-back series at City National Arena. And UNLV would take care of business as they would actually win 4-0 on March 1st, and then would win a very tight battle 3-2 on March 2nd. So heading into the ACHA National Championships, heading into St. Louis, trying to win the ACHA Division I National Championship, UNLV was riding a high as they would be going off a 6-game winning streak going into the tournament. I mean, this is a UNLV Rebels team that was ranked 5th in the nation. So a 5th-ranked UNLV goes into the ACHA National Championship tournament as one of the best teams in the tournament going to St. Louis. So what would happen in this tournament? Well, on March 9th, getting ahead of myself here, on March 9th, UNLV would take on Missouri State. And against Missouri State, UNLV would actually dominate from almost start to finish, and UNLV would win 7-2. And based off of the footage and based off of everything that we saw, thanks to Flow Hockey, by the way, for doing the video, for find a way to us watch it here in Las Vegas, I will say that when it comes to the UNLV Skating Rebels, this was a really good matchup. I was really happy to see what UNLV did in the first round of this tournament for them as they beat Missouri State on March 9th, 7-2. So UNLV the next night, March 10th, would take on the University of Pittsburgh. They take on the Panthers of Pitt, and UNLV would take care of business here as they would actually win 5-1 against Pittsburgh. And I have to give a lot of credit to the UNLV coaching staff for the people who work day in and day out trying to make UNLV hockey. They go for the practices, they go for the training, they help these players become who they are, because you could see that UNLV was playing like a team. UNLV was playing like a solo unit, like everyone was playing as one with UNLV. So they win 7-2 against Missouri State. They win 5-1 against Pitt. And they would move on to the Final Four. And this was the second time that UNLV would be in the Final Four for the ACHA Division I Championship. And UNLV would do something in the Final Four that UNLV has not done yet. UNLV would win in the Final Four, as UNLV would take on Central Oklahoma, who they split early on in the season. And after having that split early on in the year, in the Final Four, when it matters the most, they would take on Central Oklahoma, and they would win a 6-4 matchup. And you have to give a lot of credit, not just to the goaltending, not just to the defense. This is a UNLV hockey team that if you didn't have guys who I will mention later on in the show, if you didn't have them backing you up, if you didn't have these guys who are putting in all the work and putting in all the hard work and effort, they would not be where they are going to the national championship game for UNLV. So on March 12th, they would play in the Division I national championship game against Adrian College. Now, anyone who doesn't know where Adrian College is, that is in Michigan. So in St. Louis, national title game, Adrian College, UNLV. And unfortunately for UNLV, it was just not in the cards that night. Despite the hard work and despite a hard effort by all the players on UNLV, Adrian would shut out UNLV and would take home the win 3-0 on UNLV. And I mentioned earlier in the show that I had to give congratulations to UNLV for putting on a great season. The fact that you made it to the national championship game is an accomplishment in itself. The fact that UNLV, for the first time in team history, made it to the Natty, that made it to the national championship game, is recognizable. It's an achievement to UNLV. So despite the loss, and I know it's going to be heartbreaking. I mean, especially if you're playing for the team, if you're with the organization, you never want to lose. You never want to lose a national championship game. But here's what I will point out. That UNLV next year could ride that momentum. This is a UNLV hockey team that had a really good season this year. This is a UNLV Rebels team that, if you want to really take back and look at it, this was an organization that did a lot of good for UNLV. So for the skaters that are coming back, they're going to have that memory. They're going to have that on their chip on their shoulder. For the guys who are going to be coming in, they're going to be trying to help out UNLV, try to get them actually to win a national championship game. And I have no doubt in my mind that for the seniors who are graduating, for the people that are moving on from UNLV hockey, they're always going to support UNLV because this was the team that they played for. This is where you had a band of brothers. This is where you had your family of sorts. And we have a comment here, and I'm going to read it here live on the show. UNLV has gotten their athletic programs together and finally are winning. Women's basketball, women's football, hockey. I mean, this is a really good organization. I will say for UNLV, their baseball program, they have done fantastic to begin the year. If you haven't gone to Earl E. Wilson Stadium for UNLV, their baseball program has been solid as well. So if you are a alumnus of UNLV, if you're a supporter of UNLV, if you're someone who played for UNLV, you will know that this is an organization, this is a program that is doing a lot of good right now. The UNLV baseball team, the UNLV basketball team, the UNLV football team, the UNLV hockey team. This is a UNLV, this is a college that's doing a lot of good and is on the up and up right now. And as we're doing this on Vegas Hockey Hub, discussing the UNLV Rebels hockey team, I wanted to go out of the way and talk about this now because of what they did this season. So I said that I was going to mention the players. And I was going to talk about what these players and what they did this season for UNLV. So to really start this out, I'm going to start with the goaltending. I mean, this is a goaltending that I really am happy to say did a lot of good this season, as you had Vinny Benedetto. And when it came to Vinny Benedetto, this season in 20 games played as the goaltender for UNLV, he had 15 wins, 3 losses, and one overtime loss for UNLV. His goals against average was a 2.23 and a save percentage around 91.5. So when it came to Vinny Benedetto, he did a really solid job this season. He did an excellent job as a member of the UNLV Rebels goaltending. And I'm hoping that, with him, I think at this point he actually should. When it came to Vinny Benedetto, I will say that he had a really good season. And over the last 2 seasons, being able to watch him in net, it has been a good job. I really like what I saw from him. You also had Zach Wixon, who in 12 games as the goaltender went 9-3, a goals against average of 2.1, and a save percentage of 92%. And when it came to the players itself, I will point out that when it came to UNLV, there were some players who definitely did their part for the UNLV Rebels hockey team. The first player I have to mention, I've talked about him on the Prospect Watch before because he does a really solid job for the UNLV Rebels hockey team, and that is Cole Wyatt. Cole Wyatt, who has been with UNLV for a while now, he is someone who in 32 games this year had 12 goals and 41 points for UNLV. To put it into perspective, Cole Wyatt this season for the UNLV Rebels hockey team, he averaged over a point per game. In fact, he averaged 1.25 points for UNLV. So I will say for Cole Wyatt, he definitely did a stand-up job for UNLV. He did a really good job in terms of putting the puck in the back of the net, scoring points, being there every single game. Mateus Del Monte had 36 points in 31 games, 11 of them being goals for UNLV. A defenseman who can drop the gloves and defend his teammates when he needs to be. This is a guy who also averaged over 1 point per game. 2 other players who averaged over 1 point per game for UNLV was Bradley Gallant, who had 21 goals in 32 games for UNLV. There is no doubt, and there is absolutely, positively, 100% that in terms of goal scoring, he was the best goal scorer for UNLV. I got to see him a couple of times put the puck in the back of the net. The way that he's explosive with his wrist shot, good with the forehand, solid with the backhand. That was what I saw with Bradley Gallant. 21 goals on the season, 44 points for Bradley Gallant. And then on the defensive side, you had Rob McCollum, who had 22 assists in 30 games for UNLV. I want to mention that there are some other players who did a stand-up job this year, and they were actually fun to watch. Jackson Wyatt, Alec Johnson. You also had Caleb Strong as well. There were some good players for UNLV that when you watched them on the ice, when you saw them at City National Arena, they stood out to you. When it came to this UNLV hockey organization, regardless if it was the goaltending, the defense, or the forwards, there was a lot to watch. There's a lot of positivity when it comes to UNLV. And we don't know what's in store next year. But here's what we do know. The fan base, the passion you have seen from people at City National Arena. I mean, if you want to support UNLV, you have to get there at least a half hour early just to get a ticket for some of these games at City National Arena. The people who are backing UNLV hockey are supporting this team and are doing it very good. I will point that out. This is some of the loudest and some of the most passionate fans I have seen in college. UNLV has a backing that I have to commend, I have to applaud. And for all the people who are supporting UNLV, I applaud you. Because without your support, without you helping out UNLV, I know there's boosters, I know there's people who are behind the scenes helping these guys get to where they need to be, especially with a national championship game. I know that's not cheap. Trying to actually get the funding and trying to actually travel and get to where they need to be, that's not easy. So I will say for the people who are behind the scenes helping and supporting UNLV, I commend you because you are doing an amazing job helping this organization, helping this team get to where they need to be. And then since we have about 5 minutes left here on this show, talking about the UNLV Rebels hockey here on PR Connections Radio, I'm your host, Ian Kelly. I look at what UNLV could do next year as maybe a stepping stone if you look at what they've done the last couple of years. It's an organization who I feel like has been taking baby steps towards getting better and better and better. So I'm not going to make a prediction. I'm not going to make a spoiler. I'm not going to say like, hey, this is what's going to happen next year. But here's what I will point out is that next year, UNLV Rebels hockey, they are going to be a team to watch next year. They're going to be a team that you are going to have to be at City National Arena. You're going to have to go out to those games, and you're going to have to support UNLV because they are a team that is going to be a force to be reckoned with next year in the ACHA for these skating Rebels. And when it comes to the coaches, when it comes to the staff, I have to commend them as well. When it comes to the head coach, when it comes to the associate head coach, they are doing an amazing job. I've been able to speak to the associate head coach. I've been able to actually reach out and talk to him in the past before, and I can see the passion he has for this team. I can see that, when he's talking about the players, when he's talking about all the people that support UNLV hockey, you can tell that there is a lot of good coming from it. So I will say that regardless if it's, the equipment manager, the athletic trainer, when it comes to the people working in media, everyone who works part of an organization, they all deserve an applaud as well because they have done a fantastic job at UNLV. The people who are doing the cameras, people who are doing the broadcasting, for example, they are doing an excellent job. I have to give them credit as well. There's so many people who work with an organization that don't get enough respect. So, talking about UNLV Rebels hockey, once again, congratulations to them making it to the national championship game. I have to give them applaud for doing a really good job with UNLV Rebels hockey. And I'm excited to see what they do next year. I really am looking forward to seeing how UNLV performs after coming off a national championship game appearance. Because you could take that and leapfrog and continue to get better, and we'll see how they do. So, when it comes to UNLV hockey, City National Arena, they play, like I said, from September to March. So, if you're a UNLV fan, if you're someone who went to UNLV, my recommendation, go to City National Arena, check out the UNLV Rebels hockey team, and more importantly, if you want to support UNLV, now I know that they also have their website there as well. You have rebelhockey.com. That's where I get a lot of my information, is the rebelhockey.com. So I will say for UNLV, good season, really great season for UNLV. I am looking forward to 2024, 2025. And as we're getting towards the end of the show here for UNLV, I want to say on behalf of PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, check out all of the programming we have on here. We have great content. We have about a dozen shows on the network for PR Connections Radio, including Vegas Hockey Hub. And we also have our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to subscribe, if you want to like and share to all of your friends all around the world, I highly appreciate that. And I also say go to all of our social media at Vegas Hockey Hub. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere at Vegas Hockey Hub. And if you want to follow your host, Ian Kelly, my social media is right down here. So it will be at Ian J. Kelly, as I am on all social media platforms as well. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Kelly. Continue watching hockey, go support college hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.